Matthew 26:14 through 16. Then one of the 12, called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, "What are you willing to give me, and I'll hand him over to you?" Now, this is predicted and prophesied that a friend of Jesus would betray him. It was Jesus himself later showed that it would be Judas. Um, the chief priests were the religious leaders. They didn't truly run. They had sway with the Roman government, which they shouldn't have. The fact that they did was because the temple was corrupted, but they didn't have no authority to execute anything other than stonings. For some reason, Rome didn't recognize stonings as capital punishment. They weren't allowed to invoke crucifixions or put people in prison. These type of things they didn't have authority over. They'd have to go to Rome. But most people in that time would have thought that, okay, if you're going to bring something to overthrow Rome, it's going to be through the Jewish system that's set up. The problem with the Jewish system that's set up was it was broken because of the corruption. You know, a lot of people in that time thought Jesus was going to become king, which means Rome was going to be overthrown. The priests didn't want to lose their authority with Rome and lose their power and fought. So this is one of the main reasons they had a problem with Jesus, and this is why Judas went to him. There's theories about Judas trying to cause Jesus to rebel against Rome by doing this or whatever, but ultimately it's part of God's plan. Is why it happened. And we see that Jesus never had any intention to do anything with Rome. His intention was to bring about a spiritual kingdom that wasn't made of this world, and one wasn't going corrupted by this world, one that was heavenly, and that these Sanhedrin and all these Jewish people that corrupted the ideas that God sent earlier, this one couldn't be corrupted. His kingdom wasn't going to have a chance to be reigned by somebody who would turn against God, as Israel and Judah did in the past. And because there was groups of rebels in that time, we see how crucifixion truly started to deal with the rebels. We had the Sicarii and a couple other groups that were pretty much rebels. It's probably, I know Scripture mentions one of them on the cross next to Jesus being a robber, but it doesn't necessarily mention both. It refers, the fact is, either way, they would have committed a crime against Rome. So they would have stole from Rome, which meant, okay, there's probably more to it for them to be crucified. They were more likely stealing something to rebel against Rome rather than just taking, which was an act of treason. So we see how these groups oftentimes trying to overthrow Rome because they want their land back, and Rome's there. And so Judas may have been one of these people who wanted Rome gone, as many of them were. Okay. For then on he watched, and they offered him 30 pieces of silver. Now, 30 pieces of silver was the day's wage, was a price for a slave. But it doesn't, there's two different types of pieces of silver. One was of higher value than another. It doesn't specify which is given here. It's likely that it could have been the cheaper, but because we see how Judas was a cheat and a thief and took from the money bag, so he's greedy, so it probably wouldn't have had to be high. But the other price of silver, I believe, was like a year's wage each piece. But the other type was like a day's wage. But either way, this would have been set for a month wages right here at the least. It could have been more than that based on there being two different pieces of silver. But it's an interesting point that this was a typical price for a slave. It doesn't necessarily, because it's the price they're willing to pay. It kind of shows how they value Jesus. He's nothing to them. But it kind of shows Judas's greed that while they offer a price for a slave, Judas may have took anything just to get it. For then on the From then on, he watched for an opportunity to betray him. So he was trying to see when it would be best to hand him over. Now, we know that God's time frame was Passover week. Judas didn't necessarily know that until we see in John how Jesus told him, go do what you need to do, which is telling him it's time, take care of it, because your part is to betray me. You've already done that. Just finish it up. But the fact that he betrayed him for a price of a slave when he was following him. Fact is, slaves don't got people following them. These priests couldn't get past their own egos. And oftentimes that is the way the world is. They can't get past their own pride to see who the Lord is, to submit to Him. And all they see is how things affect them. The Pharisees were threatened by their own position, for their position because of Jesus. So they saw that, okay, we got to remove Jesus and they'll take care of it. But they didn't realize Jesus, by them doing this, Jesus would give an answer for all the sin. We do see some priests and Pharisees turn to Jesus and accept Him, which is why the trial was corrupted and done in secret. But we also see how there's a hardness of heart. And those with a hard heart already made up their mind. And there ain't nothing can be done with them. It's the ones that have a soft heart that can still be given over to Jesus. Can be reached.